To paraphrase Hunter S. Thompson, when you get locked into a serious beer collection, the tendency is to push it as far as you can.
Cheers.
Son of a bitch! Give me a drink! One more night! On this camping thing! Son of a bitch! If I drink it clean, I'm gonna drink my life away.
The Tap Takeover podcast exclusively uses the Physics draft beer system to dispense all of the beers we review. Physics utilizes sonic wave technology to create the ideal density microfoam head on your beer. It delivers a fresh from the tap draft beer experience that you can enjoy at home or on the go with no need for any external gas or additives. Just 4 AA batteries. Physics, tasting is believing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tap Takeover podcast. We're out of the Solid Non-Fail studio this week and on the road for a brand new segment, our homebrewer interview series. We've got a live tasting in progress, some topical brewing event news, and lots of opinions. Jim, I'm looking at you. We got some great feedback on our first 4 episodes. We're making some minor tweaks to the programming. We've invested in some brand new equipment, as you can probably hear. And amazing listener feedback has been a major part of that. Stay tuned for new shows where we'll roll out some of these improvements. And as always, you can get the latest info by following us on Facebook. Send us more questions and feedback to taptakeoverpodcast@gmail.com. We have a fun episode in store for you today. We'll be sitting down with Dave Olson from WisconsinBreweriana.com. He's going to be giving us the lowdown on his website, his beer memorabilia collection, his beer cellar, and his homebrewing experience. Award-winning homebrewer here, folks. And this is going to be our first 2-part episode. But before we get into that, as we said, we're looking to improve how we describe our beers during the tasting. The certification for beer aficionados is the Cicerone. Jim, can you give us a little background on the Cicerone program?
Sure. So the Cicerone certification program is an industry standard identifying those with significant knowledge and professional skills in beer sales and service. So you can really think of it as a beer sommelier for those familiar with wine. And it was really started by Ray Daniels in order to create standards within the industry so that both industry professionals as well as consumers can be sure of the knowledge and skills possessed by current and prospective beer servers.
Well, that's actually where kind of led me to Dave. When I was at the Mopcraft, I noticed, I spied the pin, the Cicerone pin. Well, first of all, before we get into that and your experience and your journey so far, thank you for taking some time. We really appreciate it. You invited us into your cave.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. We'll have some pictures on our website.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so thank you.
Cheers,
everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.
All right, before we get started, Dave, what are we drinking here? We're drinking one of your, I guess, award-winning beers.
Yeah, this is a Weizenbach recipe that I tweaked from the Northern Brewer catalog, and I've just been hanging on to this because it was lost in a box.
Okay, it's not so much
Truth be
aging,
told,
but you lost it.
In 2011, it won a gold medal at the Schooner Homebrew Fest, and then in 2012, it won a gold at the Midwinter Homebrew Fest.
Nice.
Excellent.
So it was, I can't take credit for the recipe. I just tweaked someone else's. But I have good water here in Oak Creek, and I have a good technical side. As anyone who's homebrewed before knows, the competitions are kind of subjective to who's tasting in that class of beer when you're competing. So
Excellent. No, it's very good.
I thought maybe something out of the box here would be kind of interesting.
No, it's great.
It's a rare treat for us. I mean, we really appreciate it.
All right, Dave, so tell us where you're at as far as the Cicerone. I know there's 4 levels. Where are you at with your journey?
Yeah, I just passed the exam for Cicerone Server, which is level 1 of 4. And they have Cicerone Server, Cicerone, Advanced Cicerone, and Master Cicerone. And I have aspirations to go for Master Cicerone. I learned a few lessons when I took the Cicerone Server test. I was kind of skeptical in the past of the Cicerone program, and I talked with Mike Romans here in town about his Master Cicerone certificate, and he gave me some feedback that was actually more inspiring for me to look into it deeper. Recently started a job as a beer server at a local craft brewery, and I thought that becoming a Cicerone might be something I'd like to do.
Yeah.
I also have probably in the back of my head, I would like to be able to consult in the beer world. Perhaps, one of my interests is pairing beer with food. I would really, I think there's a market for restaurants to learn about adding to their sales by pairing beer that they might already have on tap in-house with their recipes.
Without getting something fancy or having to go outside. They already have this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's quite a few good restaurants in town. They have good beer in-house, but when you're looking at the menu, very few of them do you see a recommendation for that particular item.
What really interested me about it was more being able to describe what I am tasting. Taking it to the next level of, is this beer good? Is this beer bad? And not really knowing how to formulate that into words.
Well, I think not even just the good and the bad, but the gray areas. You know,
Right.
like where is this hitting my tongue? The salty, the sweet, the hops, the malt. What is that process like in the actual training?
So yeah, for you, like when you approach a beer for the first time, what is that? What do you go through?
One of the things I do with beer that I purchase is, I'm a subscriber to Draft Magazine, and I look for constant input and try things I haven't seen before. I tend to, like everybody else, lean towards styles I already enjoy. One of the things I started to do recently is not look at the story on the label. And what I don't want to do is get what the brewery says the beer should taste like. So I like to taste the beer first and kind of go back while I'm sitting there enjoying it, and then pick up the bottle and see if some of the notes and flavors that I'm getting are actually what they intended. Yeah, and I used to be a lot more careful and structured. Like I would go to a beer fest and take notes while I was walking around tasting, and I kind of abandoned that. And the Cicerone connection to me right now, to go anywhere in the Cicerone levels, you have to have an understanding of the style guides. So the style guides really represent a lot of classic beers the way they should be. Craft brew isn't that way. A lot of craft brew and the fun we have when we explore it is because it's not true to style. And the Cicerone program to me was about giving me a notch in my belt as far as some expertise on the topic. And there's plenty of things I've learned. I learned I didn't know all the styles as well as I thought I did. But I also found that there's quite a bit of knowledge that people like us enjoy when we taste beer and we share beer and we care for it. Like we all know that it should be stored in the dark, right? And we don't want light anywhere near our beer. We don't want oxygen in our homebrew. And there's a lot of stuff that we kind of take for granted. This is so important. If you take it, I was an experienced homebrewer, but not super experienced. I still learned quite a few things as I studied for the test that perhaps I didn't even consider before I took the test. And I think it makes me a better server for my employer.
So what are the basic areas of knowledge that the Cicerone program teaches and promotes?
The Cicerone server part, which is that phase one, is really a deep dive into the handling and care for beer. For instance, how is beer stored? What temperatures? How about leaving the keg of beer in that environment for 24 hours before you tap it, so that the temperature doesn't change so much that it outgasses all of the carbonation. There's information you're tested on about serving. So, why do you pick a certain glass? How do you hold the glass? What angle? You never get that faucet in the glass and into the head. Keep it distinct. Why is that? So it doesn't get infected. You always use a new glass. You always rinse the glass so that you're rinsing off residue, or even if the glass was dried with a towel, you're rinsing out the particulate that could be there. And you'll see any good bar that has an interest in promoting good beer will have a glass rinser. There are quite a few bars that don't, and you will taste it. You'll do a flight and you'll taste all 5 beers taste the same. It's because the residue of the sanitizer is still in the glass. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I have.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So what was your reaction when you first looked at the syllabus, given that you didn't have a deep background in the industry? And how did you prepare for the test?
So I looked at the test and I realized there was some stuff I didn't know. There's 39 beer styles in the syllabus. And I did some online hunting for how other people had studied for the test. But effectively I crammed for the test. I went through every page of the syllabus. And
I'll be honest, that sounds like a fun night.
pretty much, had a couple of good beers, and I went through the syllabus. And when I saw something I didn't think I knew, I looked into it. After you create an account for yourself in the Cicerone website, you have access to a downloadable, like a PDF practice test. And they also have like a 10-question online test. The things that I learned from studying it kind of filled in knowledge I already had. And I think the only reason I passed the test first try was that I had been a home brewer. And some of the questions on styles in the test actually reflected beers I had already brewed, and I was used to looking at the beer judging guides and kind of thought about beer. So I think if you want to become a cicerone, you kind of got to commit to learning about the different styles from the BJCP, which is the beer judging style guides. It's published on the internet. You really have to know your styles to answer a multiple choice question where they give you the color, the ABV, and the IBU range, and which one of these beers is it? Is it the Hellesbach, the Bach, the Kolsch, or the Pilsner? Well, you can immediately get rid of the Kolsch and Pilsner because they're the wrong color, but the two Bachs are the same color. Mm-hmm. Which one is, well, you have to know the ABV range to pick that it was not the Hellesbach, but the standard Bach, because it has just a point higher alcohol range.
Wow.
So they do get into the nitty-gritty details, and it's my belief, and I'm speculating right now, that as you go further up into the Cicerone levels, the knowledge of your styles gets more detailed. Cicerone server level, the style questions comprise about 45% of the questions on the test. The serving and caring for beer is about 35%. A few history and other odd questions about beer.
I'll tell you what, talking about serving and caring for beer, let's talk about some of the beers that we're drinking tonight. Andy, you've got a pretty well put together list. Who's taking over the taps on the Tap Takeover podcast tonight?
So tonight, since we have Dave here, who's an official Cicerone, I pulled a couple different styles of beer out of my collection in the basement. We have the Atomic Whale, which is from 18th Street Brewery, and it's a collaboration with McKellar Brewery. Came out in February of 2016. It was cellared 1 year. It's a rye Russian Imperial Stout with cherries added. Next we have the Grand Reserve by Unibrow out of Canada. It's a French oak bottle fermented dark ale, bottled in 2015. Then we are going to the Weyerbacher Reserva 2015. It's an American wild ale fermented on red raspberries and with a blend of Saccharomyces and Brettanomyces yeast and lactic acid bacteria. It is then aged a year in oak barrels. Then we're going to...
Yeah. So we've got a little bit of episode 4 bleeding into episode 5.
Sour Jesus is coming back, folks.
Someone converted.
Not coming for us, coming back.
Then we have Urban Decay by Dark City Brewing Company out of New Jersey. It's an imperial stout that has been aged in Cabernet barrels. Then I believe you, Alex, you brought the Amber Smash Face from Three Floyds, which was brewed last February.
We're going to do a little experiment. We've been talking about how IPAs sometimes should and sometimes shouldn't be aged. Mm-hmm. And I've got this Amber Smash Face. If anybody was around the Midwest last year, you would have seen this uber hopped red ale. It was a collaboration with...
the band Cannibal Corpse.
And basically, it shouldn't still be around. I happened to find it on the shelf of a local liquor store last December, and I tried one, and it had really taken on these different notes and this different quality. So I thought, what better way to drink this than on the podcast, on air, a year later. So we're going to drink a year-old Amber Smash-faced pale red ale from Three Floyds Brewing. I think it's going to be a fun experiment.
Yeah, I've been really thinking about this lately since seeing the IPA that Milwaukee Brewing Company is aging in a barrel, and about how the IPAs originally came about, how much time they spent on the ships in a barrel. And we're also about the fresh, hot flavor, but what does a real, authentic IPA taste like? I don't know. I've never had one, but I hope someone recreates it, and maybe this will give us a flavor of what it might be.
Yeah, this won't be barrel-aged, but it will have been bottle-aged. Yeah, and pretty well taken care of. It was still in the cooler, and it's been in my cooler ever since. What else do we have, Andy?
Well, our guest Dave here, who's invited us into his home for this interview with him, has some special home brews that we've been trying. And what else do you have for us, Dave?
Well, I thought if I was going to punish you with my home brews, I ought to at least serve you some really good beers. I dipped into my beer cellar, which is basically a stack of boxes of beer, and I found some old Dogfish Head. And I think it's not dated, actually. It's got to be at least 2011-ish, 12. I've got a Raison d'Etre Extra, which is barrel-aged version of that Belgian ale. And I have got some Worldwide Stout. So I noticed that you guys have a bunch of stouts on your lineup, and I thought, well, let's add a little bit more stout because
we're fans.
I love Imperial Stouts.
I love them, too.
And
clearly, we haven't learned anything.
I thought as a closer, just in case we are overdue overachievers today that we could try some old 120-minute IPA.
Oh, okay.
And
Well, that's
we could
interesting.
talk
Again.
about, it's a good connection with
So
your questions.
yeah,
about
I mean, if
IPA.
that's when the Dogfish Head was originally distributed here, it's got to be a few years old, and so
Yep, that's right about when they stopped distributing temporarily is right about when I bought that.
so again, comparing and contrasting beers that should be aged versus beers that probably not so much, and see how they come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Dogfish Head 120 really defies the aging of an IPA postulate.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect example, like you're talking about, of something that's literally designed to age.
It does come in at, what is it, 13, 14% alcohol by volume.
It's a big boy.
It's a big boy, so it's in that range that we talked with Russ Klisch about cellaring beers. So it is an IPA, which you would think wouldn't be cellarable, but it's in that range. So let's see.
Well, we
Let's
finish
see
up
what
with
it
that too. I want to get just your opinion of different styles of IPAs, just in the country alone. Because I mean, I feel like the Midwest has more malt backbone to their IPAs than if you go to the East Coast with the hop bombs. You know,
Well, the East
Do
Coast
the
is
New
got
England style.
Yeah, the
right,
New
with
England
their
style
bottle
with
condition.
the brewing yeast that adds that kind of orange juice kind of texture to it.
Absolutely. I think we've gone through recently a phase where people are backing away from the classic West Coast in your face, and they went into a phase of citrusy and piney and resin kind of IPAs. Something I see transitioning today actually into people exploring more imperial IPAs. So they are not hop bombs, but they might be more boozy, and they might be more like your example here, where you accidentally save it in the box you forgot about. It might taste pretty damn good.
So what are we actually trying right now, Dave?
This is Belgian triple, but you'll notice it's actually more like a Belgian quad in color. It's about 11%, and it's just to warm me up, kind of peer together a discussion going, I thought, today.
Yeah, beautiful
And I
copper
made this.
color.
This is the last bottle that I own, so this is the end of it.
Oh,
Wow.
thank you.
A really
This is an
great
honor.
aroma as it warmed
That's
up. I could really get a lot of the acetyls coming from the aroma.
Yeah.
Definitely smells like a triple.
It was actually never an award winner, but it always kept really well. You can see I had it in a bottle, a true Belgian bottle.
So how much would you make in a batch? Like how many of those bottles?
Well, I'd made 5 gallons of beer, and I only saved up a dozen true Belgian bottles and corked them.
So we talked about some of the beers that you're bringing out for us out of your cellar. Would you say, let's talk about your cellar collection. Is most of your cellar collection homebrewed stuff that you've done yourself? Is it, do you have some whales in there?
I would call it hoarding. So, quite a few years ago,
That's a fine line, my friend. It's a fine line.
I feel you on the hoarding.
I actually quit homebrewing for just over a year and a half because I had too much beer on hand. That might sound insane, but what I found was after having about 30 gallons worth of beer available that I was feeling guilty buying more beer in the store to try new things. And I cut off production for a while so I could use up and share and deplete the stock. So this year actually is the first year I've brewed in 2 years.
Wow.
And my homebrew is probably majority of what I had aging. I don't know about you guys, but I have a hard time, stopping myself or cracking into something that's a year or two old that I know was really good when it was fresh.
Yeah.
I used to keep a full inventory of what I had.
Wow.
And I've actually, 5 years later now, I don't even keep track. It's in closed boxes, and I just I don't want to run out to Woodman's or one of the local shops. I go rummage in the box and go, oh yeah, I forgot I had this here. So it's out of sight, out of mind. Is more my
And then you get
Now,
some-
do you label everything in the boxes too?
no.
So
I
that'd be
do.
good training for your cicerone test, right? You just grab something out the box and figure out what it is.
My homebrew is labeled on the caps. I always put a couple
Okay.
initials. There's been some initials I forgot what it was. Gotta go look up in the records and see what it might be. But I actually haven't brewed hundreds and hundreds of batches of homebrew. I'm actually probably a lot less than you would imagine. We're sitting here next to my bourbon barrel porter cask. It's a real bourbon cask that I bought through the AHA.
Well, I'll tell
I
you
haven't
what.
used it recently. It needs to be.
Yeah, you got to use it.
I've got to ramp up production this next month and put a bourbon barrel porter back in there.
having a bourbon barrel sitting on your coffee table it's really bringing the room together. It's a beautiful display.
Well, this is actually a pretty good transition from like just your collection here. Looking around, you got so much stuff. Can you tell us like a little bit about like?
So what your audience can't see is.
Oh, this is what Jim McCabe would say. This makes for great radio. But we'll have some pictures, like I said.
We will be taking some pictures and we'll be posting them on the website as well as the Facebook site.
You know what? Actually, before we get into the whole collection, this the Cicerone magazine or study guide would say my glass had a hole in it. So we got to get some more stuff.
We'll pull something out of our collection first, Dave. What do you want to try first?
Well, I think since you have all those big beers, that maybe we should try the sour first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do it.
Oh, the sour hour continues.
All right.
All right. We'll be right back.
And now for some current beer news.
That's right.
Coming up in March here, March 6th, we have KBS Week in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's the beginning of their release of their annual KBS, the Kentucky Brand Stout. Should be hitting distro starting April 1st nationwide. Get to the liquor stores early when this comes in because otherwise you won't be getting it. Next in California at the beginning of March every year, Churchill's Finest Hour release party called the Renaissance Party. It's released every year. It's a fantastic barrel-aged stout. I've actually gotten a couple myself via trade. Super limited. Tickets sell out on brown paper tickets within seconds. One ticket is only going to get you one bottle of this limited edition beer. Also, March 12th, we have Hunapoo Day in Tampa, Florida. They've solved their issues with reproductions of tickets, and they're actually holding it at a festival grounds in Tampa, Florida this year. Parabola is coming end of March, beginning of April by Firestone Walker. And locally, we have Ray's Grain that has announced their next limited beer release, strictly from the brewery, Les Tres Doctores, a Belgian quad brewed with 100 pounds of Pinot Noir grapes and aged in oak barrels for 6 months. No release date has been set yet for this beer, but their last limited release, number 100, sold out in an hour and a half. Also coming up this month and next month for beer festivals, you have Madison on Tap, March 4th. So put this one in your pocket for next year. First Saturday in March is Madison on Tap every year. You have the Bell City Racine Brewing Festival, also the same weekend. And you have the Heidel House Brew Fest on March 25th. Coming up in April, come visit the Tap Takeover crew at Stein and Dine at State Fair. That will be on April 22nd. And on the 23rd, make sure to get your tickets for Crafts and Drafts at Serb Hall. Buy your VIP package and get a limited edition sampling of Ardea and Cygnus from Central Waters, the #1 rated stout in the world this past year.
And I'll tell you what, if you're one of the first few people to join us at Stein and Dine, you will be able to try a Central Waters 19, the anniversary beer that was released just this year. If you're one of the first people to our booth at Stein and Dine, come check us out.
So we're going to go with Reserva 2015 from Weyerbacher. We actually had a request from Dave. He wants to try out the physics with it, with the sour. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Cheers, boys.
All right.
All right.
So, Dave, thoughts on the Reserva?
That's really a great sour, and I thought that physics it's an interesting technique that they use. I'm a scientist, a chemist at once upon a time, and I think that's really a great nuance to have some beer with.
Well, it's going to hold that carbonation in the beer with keeping the head retention on top of it.
It certainly does. It really, it's leaving a nice lacing on the glass. Pretty cool piece of technology I haven't experienced yet.
So let's talk about this beer. As a trained Cicerone server, what should we be tasting in this sour, and what are you getting out of it that the average layperson may not?
I keep going in for another sniff. You're supposed to do a short sniff and then maybe a couple, or you can put your fingers over, and your smell is 80% of your taste-ish. There's a different statistic every time you look that up, but I'm not getting a lot of aroma, and I don't know if it's because I'm congested or
piggyback on that, actually, when we've been putting stuff through the physics, the smell has been the intense part. So it's weird that you're not picking it up.
Maybe
I think it might be you might be congested.
Or maybe it's because it's been aged a while, too. With the raspberries.
2015?
Yeah.
Is that right?
2015.
Okay, so the raspberry flavor is already
So we're,
dissipated.
yeah, we're just over 2 years on it
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of the raspberry in the finish, especially.
in the taste.
And I was mentioning earlier, cranberry, raspberry are great for sours because they're complementary flavors.
Yeah, I think that the tartness really does cut through some of the sour. I'm pretty vocal, pretty adamant about this, but I'm not a huge sour fan, and I could do one of these. This is pretty good, pretty decent.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of acidity in this. I mean, it's not short on sour. I'm getting a lot of that kind of sour bouquet. I don't know what to call it on the nose.
Definitely, like you said, the raspberries on the back end. Sour Jesus is kind of, making me a part of the flock a little bit with this one.
I don't know.
See, to me,
I'll go visit this sour Jesus, but I don't know if I'm converting.
You're not committing to that relationship.
You're a Christmas sour.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a Catholic cheester.
Or would you say agnostic
Christmas and
and
Easter,
agnostic
yeah.
sour? You're aware it's there, but you don't necessarily.
Priester.
Well, I like to think about food when I'm drinking beer, and I'm kind of trying to decide what I would like to taste this with.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think like this would be a good complement to a Thanksgiving meal. I'm still thinking about the cranberries, but you have some the real nutty flavors of wild rice, the turkey and gravy, and
So now, because you said that was your interest, do you always think of that now when you try beer? Like, what would I eat with this? 'Cause
I do. Yes and no. I don't need to decide what I want to have with a pilsner. But when I'm tasting an aged beer or a sour, I tend to kind of think of what kind of complementary flavors I'm tasting. I like to think about food pairing. If you have something like just an imperial chocolate stout, maybe not so much, but maybe there's a chunk of chocolate you could try with that, which really makes some of those flavors pop. I think with a sour, some citrusy food or maybe a cheese that was really sharp would really pop with this. Part of exploring beer, for me, the fun of it is...
So going back to your cellar collection, do you have any sour whales in there? Anything you're kind of proud of?
I have 0 sours in my cellar.
Wow. Okay.
He needs to come to Sour Jesus.
Even I have one sour.
Yeah, I got a couple sours now,
Token
too.
sour.
One token sour.
This was one of 3 that
I have a couple of Grand Crus. I might have to look and see if...
Have you brewed any sours?
I have not.
Okay. So you've stuck away from the sours.
Yeah, and traditionally, or in the past recent history, I didn't pursue them that much. Only recently, my new employer, for example, Existence is one of their sours, and they had some raspberry and cranberry flavored versions, which I thought were really excellent. As far as aging sours, the acidity and the chemistry that goes on, that is an experiment that I could get behind. Because I really think that when you get beyond the artistry of craft brewing, there's the bottom science that's still in there and the chemistry of what's going on in there. I just haven't had the opportunity to put it in my own cellar. It might be because I might have drank the good ones first.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've been saying intrigues us about that whole aging of sours. It's like, I guess, a known thing. You can age them as long as any beer, but I've never had an aged sour. I've never even come across one, I guess.
Lambics are one of the styles that can age really, really long term.
Well, we're going to go ahead and just keep on aging them. Okay.
Well, boys, you want to roll into the next brew?
Yes, I would. I'm taking it back. I'm not sure I could do a full one of these. It gets really sour after a while. The more sips you take, the more sour.
It warms up a
envelops
little
your
bit.
mouth. It warms up. That one's a little too sour for me. I changed my vote.
Just like to give a shout out to Greg Taylor, former brewer at Weyerbacher, who I got this Reserva through via trade. Thanks a lot, Greg. So leading right into our next beer, we have the Atomic Whale, which is a collaboration between McKellar and 18th Street Brewery out of Gary, Indiana. This was bottled back in February of 2016. It was cellared 1 year in rye bourbon barrels, and it is a rye Russian Imperial Stout with cherries added. And actually, it says right on the bottle that 20% of beer sales actually went to save the whales.
That's awesome.
So,
it's funny you should say McKellar. You'll see on my bar I have a War Pigs growler that I picked up when I went on a trip to visit McKellar. I went on a business trip with my wife, but I visited McKellar.
That's how it works.
McKellar bar. And as a segue maybe from your discussion about sours, the first sour I ever had that I really enjoyed, I had at McKellar bar in Copenhagen. I ordered it by accident because I took the name off the wall, off the chalkboard, and I ordered it and I tasted it and I'm like, is this a sour? And they're like, oh yeah. And I believe it was a 100% Brett sour wild ale. And it was just delicious. And I'm like, oh, now I'm going to like sours now. But I've always really enjoyed McKellar's beers, and visiting the McKellar bar and bringing some beer home with me was a treat. And I really love, I'm going to say it, they're my favorite.
Wow.
McKellar is my favorite brewer on the planet. The collaborations they do with other people, like what they do with the War Pigs Brew Pub. I had some barbecue there that's better than anything I bought in town. And the beer is fantastic. And one of the things I've always appreciated about Keller's beers is nearly everyone I've ever opened up and tasted has been wow. Even the sour I had was wow. And now we're drinking this. What is the style again?
It's a rye Russian Imperial Stout.
With
It's
cherries.
got legs. It smells like chocolate. It's just an amazing beer.
Delicious.
It really is.
It's
This, for our listeners,
You guys are
who-
going to come over every week now.
Yeah. Hey, we're
I was talking
every
earlier. I actually picked this beer up in a
every
train.
stop has invited us back.
Yeah.
So yes.
This is a spectacular beer.
For our listeners who don't know, this is considered a whale. This is, like Captain Ahab himself going after Moby Dick.
Limited
This is-
one-time release.
Exactly. This is the sort of beer that you search out. Dave, do you do any of that sort of thing? Do you do any beer trading? Do you search out beers over the internet?
120 Minute, the first one I bought off of eBay.
Really?
Yeah, literally. I'm not sure how it happened, but it showed up in my doorstep, and I was thankful.
You've
Yeah,
broken many laws, my friend.
They've ramped that down now, but that was a while back.
Well, you were buying the bottle. It just happened to be filled.
Yeah, it was horrible. Just a tragic mistake. But I think I paid like $20 for it.
Wow.
And I was willing to do it because they had quit distributing to Wisconsin, and I had to try it. I'm willing to spend money on unusual beers. This is a Stone Citricado IPA. So this year I bought this.
I've actually seen an arrogant bastard, actually a double bastard with the same type of style.
So
That
this
is a
is
comically
a
large
Magnum size bottle for those who may be familiar with wine bottle sizes.
And
Oh, we're definitely gonna take a picture of that one.
as a home brewer, I bought this because it had beer in it and it had a flip top bottle I could reuse. So I have designs of bringing this out to the campfire later this summer with something I made, maybe my Russian Imperial. And what I tend to do, to answer your question more precisely, is I do search out beers and I tend not to sit on them. If I can acquire some beer, I haven't tried trading yet. I probably have some beers that I could trade well, but this one's empty. Sorry, it's gone. But it was, it was designed to be. It had actually a 30-day shelf life. It was an IPA that was designed to be consumed quickly.
So it's basically a drink by edition.
Yeah, this was the Stone 20th Anniversary Citricado IPA. So they really intended us to try this and dispose of it quickly.
Wow.
I'm really much better at the disposing of it quickly than
I think we all are here.
Cheers to disposing of beer quickly. Cheers. So let's talk about this beer that we're drinking. Let's talk about the whale. It is delicious. I mean, I'm getting rye right off the bat. Are you guys getting that?
Yeah, it's super spicy. I want to say, I don't know if it's the rye or it seems like there may be a smoked malt.
Yes.
Or it could be
yes.
like a ton of rye. It could be that
I get
spicy.
chocolate on the nose. Just
Yeah.
big time, like in my
So
face.
it's
give me
pouring
something
super
smoked.
dark, very, very thin head. Even the physics machine could
Yeah, there's super
barely get a head on this thing.
super low carbonation on it.
Really good legs when you swirl in your glass.
Oh, yeah.
The
Yeah,
that stuff
it just-
hangs onto the glass like
Just
a
clings.
Yep.
suction cup.
So,
But I hear you, Alex, as far as the smokiness. Yeah.
Matured,
definitely getting some
matured
smokiness.
alcohol.
And I love that the
much
cherries
I don't get much of the cherries.
very subtle.
No.
Very subtle.
Yeah.
I get the cherries if have you guys tried chewing your beer, so to speak, where you use your tongue with that mouthful and push it up into the roof of your mouth a couple times?
We're gonna do that right now.
Yeah, let's try.
Wow, that's a different
Yeah,
flavor.
there it is.
Yeah. Wow.
There's the cherry. Wow.
Tips
So
from the
there's
pros.
there's the pro tip from the Cicerone.
Okay, so just to be clear, I'm not a Cicerone yet, I'm a Cicerone server. They didn't teach me to chew my beer. Probably read something in Draft Magazine or something like that.
No, but that's a good tip. Really.
This is a very good tip.
Your palate is, again, your smell and what you taste. And if you can actually use your tongue and force some of that into some of those receptors that aren't going dormant as they get hit with some alcohol, you get a lot of different flavor. That's my tip of the day, I guess.
Well, let's give our listeners a quick tip of the day. you guys should go check out this website that Dave has put together, WisconsinBreweriana. It's a fascinating website. As a history major in college, I can really appreciate the history behind beer, and Dave has delved right into it. Dave, what can you tell us about the history of beer and just the way that this amazing thing that we all enjoy has evolved over the years?
Well, one of my favorite TV shows was how beer saved the world. But if you look back into history, it's really interesting to me that they find, we talk in the Gregorian calendar right now before Christ, but 3,000 years ago they were making beer, and they found recipes in Mesopotamia. The Giza pyramids were built by paying the laborers in beer. And I think the history of beer has influenced agriculture. How much grain do you need to live over the winter before you can start growing more grain? I think a lot of grain production of barley in agriculture is attributed to probably someone accidentally fermenting some barley in a vessel that they were holding it in. But before the Egyptians were online, the culture was already farming barley and getting, agriculture was getting online, because they think, this is just a theory, and I'm supporting it because I like beer. Beer had a lot to do with the beginnings of agriculture. It's documented. There's beer recipes that are 3,000 years old, and it was a part of the industrialization of humans.
Well, it's kind of the start of the civilization, but not only that, but its most major role probably was in the continuance of the human civilization, because that was the only way most people were able to get clean water, right?
Absolutely. People in the medieval times didn't drink water. In fact, when the pilgrims were coming to America and landing, some would like to claim, with a smirk on their face, of course, that they ran out of beer, so they had to come ashore and brew some more beer. And there was plenty of clean water in pristine America that hadn't been tainted yet, but they were, bent on producing some beer so they could continue their voyage.
And they were so afraid of dysentery back then. It was
Well, that's true too. Not all the water at that time was as pristine as the stuff in America. People were drinking dirty water, and actually the safer way to drink, the life-saving liquids, was to actually brew it. So beer has saved
These are all great
civilization.
speculations to enjoy over a beer, I think.
Which is where the Reinheitsgebot came along, right?
Absolutely. So the German purity law of
1516.
At that time, you could use water, hops, and barley. They didn't know there was yeast yet, and yeast is after Louis Pasteur. I keep thinking of him in terms of pasteurization, but he was actually looking into pasteurizing beer. So people would like to think he was looking into pasteurizing milk, and that's not true. He really was working for the brewery community.
Yeah, easier to tell the kids that it was all about the milk.
I may have been drinking a high ABV. The history is something that brought me into collecting. So the room that your listeners can't hear right now is Wall to Wall Breweriana, which is memorabilia. I collect only Wisconsin memorabilia for breweries. And I have stuff that goes back to 1850s here, all the way up to maybe the 60s. The only current modern thing you'll see hanging around here is I have a new Glarus Drink Indigenous sign. Which
I did notice that. I thought it looked weird.
I think it's low to the ground. But
Yeah.
I really respect that particular brewery in Wisconsin for how they've gone about their business and being true to the way the German communities were with their breweries. In America, one of the interests that I have in all of this memorabilia is, of course, the brewing history. And I think it's really interesting in Milwaukee that we have such a great heritage, and it's kind of depressing to me that so many people aren't aware of it. I've got wood cases here, I've got trays, I've got signs, I've got lighted signs. It's obvious, probably when you guys walk by all this stuff, that my passion is really beyond just beer and glasses and bottles. I started collecting in the mid-70s with my father. We collected beer cans. And in the 70s, beer cans were collected. It was a huge fad. There's books and books available to reference about all these kinds of beer cans. But the fad at the time was who could get the most. So my father and I had between 8,000 and 10,000 beer cans in our collection. So the house I grew up in was wall-to-wall beer cans. And at one point in time, he and another friend of his decided the fad was ending, time to sell out. So we went to St. Louis to a beer can convention. They still have those today, by the way. And we sold our whole collection as much as we can. Some of these cans here are like leftovers that didn't maybe sell, and we kept them. But my connection to collecting goes back to time with my father. He passed away in 2009. A lot of my trays, many of the signs, some of the pieces in this room are from him. And it's a sentimental thing, which I think a lot of people that collect have sentimental attachments. I probably loved beer more than he did. He wasn't a beer drinker. But we collected together. I went away to college after high school. I didn't collect anything. And there's a cone top can over there that I found while I was at school, and it got me restarted in this. The Breweriana is the collection of all of this memorabilia. So my website that you're asking me about, what I would like to do is make a reference website for collectors to display what's possible. I already know I can't collect it all. I mean, the room is full, and I have what I would consider a lower tier. There's other collectors out there that make this room look like a comic book.
And you've got to keep some room for beer in your
Absolutely.
in your beer cave.
Yeah, it's neat that I'm able to host this here and for you to see this. We could talk at hours on every brewery that's on this wall.
Well, I think this is a great time to break it off. We're going to make this our first part of our two-part episode. We're going to come back with Dave. We're going to talk about his Breweriana website, WisconsinBreweriana.com. We're going to talk about the history of brewing, history of beer in Wisconsin, and we're going to get into a few other beers. So it's not that we have no more beer this time. It's that we just have a person with too much information. So we're going to break this into two parts, and we will see you guys next week.
No more beer.